right, welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm here with Dr. Patrick Agoro, who is a licensed counselor who runs a mental health clinic out of Lake Forest, Florida. Patrick has a PhD in counseling. Also, he has a certified clinical trauma professional and a certified grief counseling specialist. Welcome to the channel, Patrick.
Thank you. I also just FYI, I go by Cousin Pat because I got Cousin Pat therapy and got that nickname because I had an older cousin. We're both named after our grandfather, so they called me Cousin Pat. So feel free to do that or just Pat. It's fine.
All right. All right, so I want to talk to you about mental health. You have so many certificates, degrees, and experience in this particular um, subject, so I really wanted to pick you to talk about this. All right.
No
So,
problem. I look forward to it.
all right. Mental health is something that is new to me. I feel like over the last 4 to 5 years, we really talked about mental health and prioritized it. Why are we now identifying mental health as an issue compared to 20, 30 years ago?
Well, 20, 30 years ago, it was still considered by certain groups of people, including my father, as sort of like you were weak if you needed that, or that's a bunch of hogwash. Um, but now more and more people in all cultures are realizing the benefits of therapy. And I want to tell you a really quick story. I am a pastor at a Baptist church over here. And before I became a pastor of that church, I would go there and visit. And I said, I want to volunteer. And if you know anyone who needs help, and a very nice lady says to me, Sweetie, we don't do that. And then she pointed to her hand. Now, she was African American. And so the church is primarily African American. And what I was told was that, you know, the African American community, a lot of people who use therapy, they're looked upon as weak, but that is now changing very, very much. And I see more and more people of all diversity, all cultures, starting to come in and speak about what's bothering them. So it's starting to cut that cover, that mask, that feeling of, oh, this is embarrassing, is starting to come away.
It's funny you said that about, African Americans, and we don't do that here because growing up you always heard, I'm clearly African American. You always heard whatever stays at home, what happens at home stays at home. And sometimes things are traumatizing at home that you need help to deal with. So I'm glad that that layer's starting to peel back, but there's so much more work to be done still.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah, no, a lot, and you find in all cultures, things that occurred at home were very traumatic. A lot of people have childhood trauma, and they thought just burying it was the best way. And I would say that was me as well. But you find that with time and the right coping strategies, you can learn to deal with the trauma, and then you'll find other areas of your life will also open up.
Absolutely. Moving on, do you think mental health is discussed enough as it should be in this as in the state? Is mental health discussed as much as it should be?
Is your question, is it discussed enough? Is that your question?
Yes, sorry about that.
No, no, that's okay. Um, it's becoming more and more relevant. I go to a lot of schools, and um, I think in certain areas, I think mental health is an important issue and it's discussed a lot. I just think in a lot of situations, the tools and modalities aren't being used correctly. So, for example, parenting classes for certain people that maybe come through DCF, they're not really doing much. There's a lot of tools available. For example, I run domestic violence classes, and a gentleman I'm seeing, he will told me that this is his second time around, and the first time he said one of the classes they spent the whole hour talking about Bitcoin. Now that's a waste. That's a waste of a resource. We want to be friendly with clients, but it's not, it's a lot of times people, therapists or clinicians, they may use this time to kind of tell you about them. And that's a little bit you want to self-identify. So if you had traumas as a clinician, you can let people know, but it's not to be used as a social hour. But a lot of people, they're using therapy wrong, and a lot of people who are forced into therapy, they're not. It's not being utilized. So what I do when I get someone, I make sure that what we're doing is exactly what they need. We're not wasting any time.
Hmm. Um, I know from working in pediatrics, there's really no resources for kids 18 under that I've seen here in New Jersey. What are steps do we need to be taking to protect our youth?
So ask me that one more time, please. I'm sorry. Let me make
I
this a
was
little louder.
saying, I work in pediatrics and I know kids 18 and under, there's really no places for them to go or reach out for help when dealing with mental health issues. What can we do to protect our youth?
Well, what we can do to protect our youth is people have to say something. A lot of people don't want to get involved because they're afraid. So if you see something or you've heard something or if you've been witness to something, call DCF or maybe in New Jersey it's called CPS, Child Protective Services. Here it's Department of Children and Families. Um, um, Also, a lot, the teachers have to look out for certain signs. The school nurse, people in the community, they have to look out. Um, but as a child, sometimes you feel lost. You don't know what to do or who to call, or if you're not familiar with this. So that's the first thing. But if a child's watching this, someone 18 and under, and there's issues, try to talk to someone at the school. A lot of schools now are having social workers. Um, Also, some of the school districts have counselors on hand. But if there's a child who's feeling suicidal, or if there's a child who doesn't understand what's going on, he wants to talk to someone, he can there's an 800 number to dial. And I even tell people, look, if you don't have a lot of money and you just want someone to talk to get through a moment, call the suicide hotline. Even if you're not feeling suicidal, but if you want to just you're feeling going through a rough spot and they ask you, are you suicidal? You could say, I'm not sure how I'm feeling right now, but I know I don't feel right. And at least that's somebody to talk through to get through the moments. And then, there's resources, but as a child, they don't know how to do that. So as adults, we kind of have to protect the children in all areas. And like I said, if you see something, say something. I've called the cops on several things I've seen over the years. I saw a guy smack a baby for no reason, called the cops. So you just have to be vigilant because and I talk to these kids after they're removed from a home and they miss their mom, they miss their dad, but they're like, yes, this is a much better environment. And their grades go up. They feel safe and secure. So it's really just got to look for something. And then if you feel like something is going on, call.
Hmm. We talked about kids. I want to talk about men and mental health because it seems like the stigma, you know, you're not a man if you cry, you're toughen up, be strong, be a man about it. Why is it so difficult for men to reach out when they need, a mental health check or they need to figure out, they need to express their emotions?
Well, again, some of it's cultural. Um, I know that I've dated women of different ethnicities and culture, and I'm a very emotional guy and will continue to be that way for the rest of my life. And in some communities, it's like if you cry, you're not considered manly. It's not machismo. Uh, I mean, if you cry, it's if you cry, it's you're not machismo. You're not manly. So it's tough because if you grew up in an environment uh, where it was, showing emotions were frowned upon, and now you're a grown person. It's like you look upon you feel like you're weak or you're disappointed in yourself. And I had a young boy, and he was raised by a very machismo man. This is what the caseworker described him as. She said he is machismo. And I just started talking to him, and he began crying. And when I spoke to the father, he was like, well, maybe don't bring things up. And that was his solution. Don't bring things up that will make him cry. And I think I just said, like, how was your day going? Or tell me more about that. And then, of course, the young man kind of fibbed a little bit about what he had said because he didn't want his father to yell at him or be disappointed at him. But that's what it is. And that little boy is going to grow up with a stigma that being emotional is bad. Now, being overly emotional all the time or not having the ability to cope with emotions properly, that's an issue. But if you're grieving or something, if you're grieving over the loss of a marriage or the loss of a pet or the loss of a father or a mother, like I lost my father 2 years ago. Um, every once in a while, I start to cry. And as long as grief is kind of, I look at grief kind of as like alcohol in a way, because, there's functioning alcoholics, but as long as grief isn't affecting your life negatively, where you can't get out of bed and you can't move and you can't work, but it's okay if 2 years later, like even if tomorrow I cried, that would be fine because it's not a disease, it's a condition that you're feeling, and it can last forever. But that's pretty much what it is. It starts at an early age, and then some women don't like men who cry, but a lot of women do. So they feel like they can't, open up. And I've been with women that you can't express yourself. And so that's an issue for a lot of men, not being able to be themselves. That's why therapy is so great.
I hear a lot of when mental health is discussed. I hear a lot about self care. Go for a walk, listen to music, draw, do something you love. But what are signs that you may need professional help that self care can't solve?
So signs that you may need mental health where self-care
You
may
need
not be
professional
enough.
help instead of just
Professional help instead of just self-care. Okay. Well, signs again are if it's becoming chronic, any condition that's chronic. Um, now chronic obviously means consistent. Like I suffer from chronic pain, it never goes away. So if something's no longer acute, it's now chronic, that's a sign where you need professional help. And you got to also look at someone who I've talked to people who they're worried about something that happened. I had a young lady who's 19, and she's telling me a story about a guy she met when she was 12, and it starts to become like, oh, I could sense that this is like a really deep rooted mental illness here, where even therapy may not be enough for this person. They may need to, I mean, maybe even check into an inpatient facility, or may even need some type of medication after a lot of assessment is done. Some certain assessments are done. So you gotta feel out. But if it's the rule is though, if it's becoming chronic or it's affecting your life in a negative way, you can't get out of bed. You're thinking about hurting yourself or hurting someone else, or you're obsessing to the point of just taking over. You're forgetting everything else you're supposed to do. You're shrieking on your responsibilities. You're not showering. You're not brushing your teeth. These are signs of depression or um, not feeling well. And then, mental illness is a little bit deeper. There's signs, but like I said, I spoke to a young girl where she was worried about she's not going to have food to eat because she doesn't know where to get food. And I said, what about a grocery store? And it became this convoluted, and I could see like, oh, this is a deep, you start to talk and it's like it's not coherent. So if you sense that, someone's not coherent, like the conversation isn't. It seems it seems abnormal, and a lot of people think when you're talking about people, you're judging. But what I'm doing is I'm not judging. I'm assessing. So it's an assessment when you talk to someone. Also, if somebody starts to change their habits and then now they're maybe drinking more or they're taking a certain type of drugs or they just look different. These are all signs that professional help may be required.
Okay. You're a counselor and you listen to so much trauma and pain that people go through. How do you prevent that trauma and that pain from taking it home with you?
You mean me as the counselor taking home with me?
Yes, you're talking a lot about heavy subjects and depression and mental health and people's traumas. How do you not take all that home with you?
Well, I have uh, I have my own coping strategies that I do. Um, and there's such a thing as burnout where a therapist, a counselor, clinicians could get burnt out. Um, I had I'll tell you a story real quick. I had a young man. I deal with some people that they'll frustrate you. The parents will frustrate you very much. And I had this cute little boy, 9 years old, and he was just like, "Can I talk to you outside?" And I said, "Sure." So I said, "What's up? What's going on?" So he said to me, "I just don't understand. I don't understand why my uncle." And then he went into detail about his uncle doing something. And what he told me, it made me cry. But what I did was I turned my head and then I just sort of, and he didn't see me. And I got very angry because this was a grown man who has mental health issues. This man, but he was abusing his nephew, and so it's hard sometimes not to hear a story like that and just be heartbroken. But you have to have your own coping strategies to not take it home with you. Um, and what makes me get through the day is if I'm helping more people. If I help somebody that maybe not in that case, but if I help other people that day, that makes me feel good. If I'm doing more, if more good is coming from my therapy than or my help, doing uh, counseling sessions. But in that case, this is why you have to say stuff because that little boy was taken away from that person, and now he'll need counseling for a very long time. But sometimes it's hard not to take it home with you. But when you do, you just gotta, take a deep breath. I'm not a drinker, but every once in a while I will have a glass of wine. And that seems to be enough for me. But I don't recommend that if you have issues with alcohol, obviously. So,
Mhm. From listening to your story, I know you've dealt with trauma in the past. I know the loss of your father within the last 2 years you talked about. How do you deal with traumatic events like that without falling back into old patterns?
um, so, so you asked me how do I break? Ask me that question again. I'm sorry.
How do you deal with trauma without falling back into old patterns?
So how do I deal with trauma without falling into old patterns?
Correct.
Okay. Well, for me, or what I tell people is, you know, a lot of people are their own worst enemy. You know that expression, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Um, so a lot of people will put themselves in situations where they're allowing a trigger to occur from something that could also trigger an old trauma. Um, so a lot of people they don't want to walk away from situations that they definitely should walk away from. And a lot of people fool themselves or they make excuses for situations or themselves. So the first thing you got to do is be self-aware and mindful. So I am very mindful of my environment. When I talk to certain people, I'm mindful of who I'm speaking to, what that person can possibly trigger in me. Um, and if you run into a trauma and it triggers old habits, you essentially have to start using your strategies or create some parallel to what's happening so that you can remove that. And there's different ways to do that. If narrative therapy is very good for trauma. I'm like you said, I'm a certified clinical trauma professional. So there's a lot of different ways to deal with trauma, but narrative therapy works for children. Um, if you fall into old habits and you need to break them, you have to change what you're doing. So, what I like to tell people to do is I like to tell people to do these 6 routines. The first one is start off 5 minutes a day of meditation, then 5 minutes a day of affirmations, 5 minutes a day of visualization, 5 minutes a day of exercise, 5 minutes a day of reading, and then 5 minutes a day of journaling. Eventually, we want to get that up to 10 minutes a day. And that should give you a nice routine for the first hour of the day to set up the rest of your day. Now, does that mean you're going to have perfect days every day? No. And I saw this clip on YouTube. Some days, this guy, this Indian fella, it was a very cool video. He goes, not every day can be a good day. Some days are just effed. And so what do? Take a rest, start over. Tomorrow's a new day. But the whole goal is, your mental health is like a stock chart, and you want to go up. But if you go down a little bit every once in a while, that's okay. If you have an off day or an off week, that's okay. As long as you keep going up and then you have an off day, it doesn't mean you haven't learned. It doesn't mean you haven't grown. It doesn't mean, you're not getting over trauma. It just means you just had a rough day. That's all it is. Then you just move on and you start over.
Right. Speaking of old habits and struggling, I know from listening to parts of your story that you've dealt with substance abuse of your own. How
Mhm.
much did those struggles take of your life?
How much what, ma'am?
How much of those struggles took away from your life? So when you were dealing with your substance abuse, how much did it take away from your everyday life?
Well, so you asked me how much did it take away from my daily life because
Yes.
of substance abuse? Well, I made some silly choices because I suffered from chronic back pain. And so just to tell everyone watching, I was in a car accident and I've had 3 surgeries, soon to be 4. And I've done everything you can imagine under the sun and wasted a bunch of money. And so I just was like, I'm just gonna load up on pills because I can't deal with it anymore. Because I got these injections and they worked for like 2 months, and I was like, oh, this is great. And then the pain came back, so I got very depressed. So I wound up going to a drug counselor, and he wanted to put me in a program, an inpatient facility. But I had, and this is where people have to be able to make the right decisions and walk away. I was dating a young lady and I asked her, I'm going to go in there and would you wait for me when I come out? And she said no. So, of course, instead of being like, oh, you're a piece of garbage and I need to just go in and worry about myself, I essentially didn't go in and I just toughed it out. And it took about 2 to 4 months of like shaking and kind of like agitation. And then it just sort of, I can't say one day, but then I just had to stop taking certain things. And once that went away, I just kind of got back on track. And it was becoming an issue. It was affecting my mental health as well, because that stuff, I was taking everything. I was taking muscle relaxers, opioids. Oh God, I should have wrote this down. Sleep pills. It's taking like my hand would be full from here to here,
Like a
from here to
Skittle
here,
bag.
just be full pill with pills. And so it affected my ability to worry. or not worry, it affected my ability to function clearly. Um, so I think I might have even gotten into a car accident, a minor little car accident, and it could have been a lot worse. So, it takes away your ability to make good decisions. And um, those pain pills, they're no joke. And so, yeah, that's what it did for me, just not having clarity and not being who you really truly are.
With substance abuse comes loss. What is something that you, or a relationship that you lost due to your, the painkillers, the opioids, you're trying to deal with the pain? What did you lose during that time?
Well, I lost myself. I lost myself. I lost my self-confidence. It was a combination of things. Um, I think I even had a couple little stints with it. But the big stint was where I was taking everything, and then I would try to convince myself that just taking these pills were okay. Um, so what I did for me, what I lost was myself. I lost my confidence and my ability to make clear decisions and just living my best life. I wasn't living my best life. So that's what I lost. And that's why, you know, therapy and getting clean is very important because you make better decisions. You are able to be clear. You look at Robert Downey Jr., he would have never been able to work as Iron Man if he was still getting drugged out. So,
That's it. Um, what was the final straw to say, I gotta turn this around, I gotta clean up, I gotta turn my life into a different direction?
well, a final straw, I mean, um, I would say like embarrassing myself a few times. Uh, Maybe an embarrassing myself was kind of a. I sort of embarrassed myself one time with somebody. Uh, Nothing too bad, but just sort of said something while I was high, and then realizing uh, that wasn't who I am or what I want to say. Even if it's a joke, I shouldn't have said anything like that. So that was kind of the final straw for me. And that's when I kind of went to see a counselor. Uh, and again, um, this was a long time ago, and this was before. And keep in mind, I've been in two mental institutions in my life, so that's even separate from this. But so I had issues, and so sometimes um, so I was dealing with a lot of things. But the final straw for me was probably just realizing, like, oh, I'm embarrassing myself, and I'm sort of just not making good decisions. So that was really it.
Um, what do you say to yourself that, what, I've been through so much trauma, I've been through so much pain, I'm now in a place where I have dealt with that trauma, dealt with that pain. I want to help others come across the bridge of that moment of clarity or freedom for whatever they're dealing with. How did you come to that?
How did I? Okay, so I apologize to keep making you repeat yourself. You're breaking up a little bit, but I think you said what was my moment of clarity.
Your moment of clarity to see that, I've been through trauma, I've been through pain, I've dealt with it. Now I want to help others deal with it and regain their moment of clarity.
Oh, well, there were different things in my life that made me always want to investigate different areas of mental health. I was going in the direction of trauma. And then I was very interested in people who were narcissists. Narcissism was very interesting to me because I kept running into the same types of people, learning how to break habits. And then also, up until my father died, I really hadn't lost anyone that, kind of meant so much to me. My father and I didn't always get along, but in the end, we had a really good relationship. And I've lost a few grandmothers, but and that when I lost my dog, or some people might be watching this going, "Oh, he's comparing his father to his dog." No, I'm not, but my dog was with me a long time and I loved him to death. And then obviously my father, that meant so much to me because he was our relationship was really going well. So all these things that happened in my life made me kind of want to take that and go with it. So I even did this interview on Sirius Radio, and they were asking me similar questions, and I said to them, some people, they do things because, like you asked me earlier, why don't people get help? And I said some people are afraid of being judged in certain cultures, men especially. But there's this expression, and I didn't come up with it, but I use it. For example, some a caseworker, she wasn't impressed with me. Another caseworker told me I didn't make a good first impression, she said. And the thing is, I told her, is your opinion of me is none of my business. So that's what I try to teach people. What people think, or this one doesn't like you, your opinion of me, like when we end this call, if you don't like me or you're like, oh, this was terrible, it's really none of my business if you what you think about me. It's like I have to just do as long as I'm doing the right thing and trying to help people. And that's why I try to tell people also when you're going through therapy, pay compliments to people, volunteer, like, you know, do something that makes you feel good. And if you compliment someone, you'll find that you'll feel good and they might even wind up complimenting you back and you'll have an interaction that is good. So that was kind of, you know, I've been doing, obviously I have my doctorate in counseling. And so I was in school for a very long time, even longer than, I didn't even tell some people like that I was in counseling because I didn't want to be judged myself. Like, oh, you're going to counseling? Like not in counseling, but oh, you're going to become a counselor. Like, because some people are like, oh, you're crazy. How are you going to be a counselor? And I think my past experiences is what makes me a good counselor because there are counselors out there that are very academic and they sit down and they look like every counselor you've seen on TV. And when I come in and talk to a kid or a vet, or because I'm a veteran as well, I talk. These are what I deal with and specialize in. I get the response like, "Oh, he's goofy, he's silly," and that's what I try to do. I try to utilize my sense of humor in my interactions with, because I'm a former stand-up comedian as well. And so I try to use that to make people feel comfortable and at ease and let them know also I self-identify like, hey, I've been through trauma as well. And a lot of times with the kids, I let them know it's not your fault and you're very special. I always end the sessions with children and even adults sometimes, but I forget sometimes with the adults. But I always let the kids know, I want you to repeat after me. My name is so and so, and I am a special young man or woman, or young lady or young boy, something along those lines. So that's what I get out of it, and that's why I got into it, and that's why I feel good. And I was in IT, not to kind of get off the subject. I was in IT, and I was like, I don't really want to do this anymore. I'm not enjoying it. I get nothing out of it, and so I just moved over to counseling. I just had to take the time to get everything I needed, um, and so hope that answered your question.
Thank you so much. Thank you for a wonderful interview. I wanted to do my bonus question with you. I do this with every guest I have in this channel. You're from Florida, or you're currently in Florida right now. What is
Yes.
one place in Florida that everyone has to go to, like whether it be a restaurant, a park, a bar? What is one place you should check this out?
There's a lot of great places in Florida, and I'm not really a traveling man. I even like, that's another thing. Like, just be yourself. I know, just be yourself, and if you're not something, open up your doors a little bit, flap your wings a little bit, try something new, but also stay true to who you are, and as long as you're not being bad or, some people wanted me to be more outgoing or whatnot throughout the years. Um, I would say, um, if you want a good time or to have fun, um, Ybor City is fun. It's a little party town, but there's some fun stuff in there. Um, I mean, try to make good decisions while you're there. But also we have the in Tampa they have the boardwalk, You can hear my accent, and the pier. Um, okay, so I'm in a small town in Florida, about 2 hours from uh Tampa. I'm not gonna tell you the town, but the food here, the reason I'm not gonna tell you the town is it's very challenging to find really good food where I live. I live in a small town where we don't even have mailboxes. We don't because we don't have a mailman. So because the town's that small. So, but I would say check out the Tampa, the boardwalk, the fishing pier, or you could check out a ball game, Tampa Bay Devil Rays, I think it is. Um, and the fishing here is incredible. So, and I've heard there's things I want to learn too. I've been here maybe 13 years in Florida, and I still haven't seen, even when I lived in New York, I never traveled or went to places. So, but Ybor City might be a fun time.
All right.
But with people though, with a group.
Okay. Thank you so much, Patrick, for doing this. You can check out Patrick on his website, cousinpattherapy.com. You can check out his Instagram page called Real Cousin Pat. Thank you again for doing this with me.
Hey, no problem. Nice to meet you, and thank you so much.
Nice to meet you. Once again, I'm Brianna Guyton from Tell Me All About It. Have a good one.